Guys, the Battlefield 6 open beta is finally here, and I know everybody is super hyped, and I believe the open beta it's already live right now, meaning you can simply download and play the game completely free without any restrictions across all platforms. And if you have any issues downloading the beta, make sure to check out my previous video. But anyway, I've been playing the beta for the last couple of days, and today I'm purely here to talk about how the game actually performs on my system and some of my general impression about the game. So let's jump right into it. Alright, a lot of you guys don't know I used to post a lot of benchmarks on this channel, but I rarely do nowadays. I played this game on my personal PC which I built back in 2021, which consists of a Ryzen 7 5800X CPU, not the 3DX version, just the regular 5800X, and an RTX 3070Ti with 8 gigs of VRAM. And I'm gonna test the game out on the most common resolution nowadays, which is 2560 by 1440 on low, medium, high and ultra settings, and see how the game performs. Alright, I'm starting with ultra settings. Ultra preset pretty much max out everything on 1440p resolution. I wouldn't recommend playing on ultra settings, especially if you have 8 gigs of VRAM. And also I'm here using the DLSS and set it to quality. So 1440p ultra setting, DLSS set to quality, and I'll be getting around 75 to 85 FPS most of the time. But sometimes when a lot of explosions, destruction happen on the screen, the frame rate is tend to drop around 60s. But thankfully the VRAM usage is hovering around 7.2 to 7.5 gigs. So haven't faced any major hiccups or frame rate drops due to VRAM limitation, which is something I kinda surprised to say because nowadays a lot of games require you to have at least 12, maybe sometimes 16 gigs even on 1440p, but thankfully the game seems to well optimize in terms of VRAM usage. So even if you have 8 gigs of VRAM or at least 6 gigs of VRAM, you can get away with it turning down some settings. And remember the last video we discussed about the minimum system requirement. The game needs you to have at least a minimum of RTX 2060, and I thought the game was kind of forced you to use some ray tracing features or something like that, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I've seen some benchmarks, the game runs fine even on a GTX 1060 as long as you have enough VRAM and of course a powerful CPU. I'm going to talk about the CPU usage a bit later, and now I'm going to turn down the settings, and this is running the game on 1440p high settings and DLSS set to quality, and I've been getting around 80 to 90 FPS most of the times, and sometimes dropping to 17s with all the destructions and explosions going on. And this is hands down the most demanding map on the beta, called Siege of Cairo. It's a very compact close range focus map with a lot of destructions and explosions going on. It looks incredible, not gonna lie, but it's a bit demanding on the CPU side with everything going around on your screen. The frame rate is tend to drop to around 70s, sometimes 60s, and my GPU usage is just hovering around 80%. That means you're facing some sort of a CPU bottleneck, and on top of that I'm using NVIDIA GeForce Experience to record the gameplay, which adds a bit of a stress on the CPU. Without recording I can get around 5 to 10 FPS more, but of course it's depend on what going on your screen. I tried to record using my capture card, but it's completely busted now. I can't get it to work, so I decided to record using the in-game recorder. But keep that aside, the game is very much heavy on the CPU side. Battlefield games are always known to have a bit demanding on the CPU, especially the games like Battlefield 2042, and Battlefield 6 seems to have a significant impact on your CPU performance. And this is an 8-core 16-thread CPU, and it's always hovering around that 65-70% usage. Anyway, now let's turn down the settings to medium and see how it performs. Alright, now I'm running the game on 1440p medium setting and DLSS set to quality, and I'm getting around 85 to 100 FPS most of the time, especially on this map. This is a very demanding map as I previously said, but turning down the settings to medium doesn't really seem to impact much on your performance because you are already on a CPU bottleneck. Alright, now we are moving on to low settings or competitive settings, I would say. And low setting is pretty much what I used on every single Battlefield game because I wanted to get that highest frame rate and the lowest input lag possible. And to be honest, even on low settings the game looks absolutely incredible. Alright, this is me running the game on 1440p low settings without using any upscaling method, so it's basically native 1440p. And also in this Battlefield game you can actually turn down the anti-aliasing and completely disable it, which I don't think was possible in previous Battlefield games, but it's ended up resulting that jagged edges, which I personally not a big fan of. But compared to the previous two maps that we played, this map is somewhat less demanding on the CPU side, ended up resulting a better frame rate. It's much more of an open-ended large scale map with less destruction and explosions, so my frame rate is always hovering around that 110-120 mark, which is quite acceptable. So compared to the previous two maps, I've been getting around 10 plus FPS on this one, so the performance is overall heavily depend on what you're playing and what goes on your screen. You can always always turn on NVIDIA DLSS and set to quality, which I personally do in pretty much all games nowadays. So on 1440p low settings, DLSS set to quality, you'll be getting around maybe 5 FPS more compared to previous, but overall visually it looks much cleaner and sharper. All in all, I would say the game performs well, but I would expect a little bit more performance out of this. No doubt the game is very heavy on the CPU side, especially if you want to get that high refresh rate, first person shooter experience. You need to have a proper high-end CPU to push that frame rate over the limit. But unfortunately, if you have some sort of a mid-range CPU, something like a Ryzen 5 3600, even though you pair it with a decent GPU, you might still struggle to push a decent frame rate out of it. In addition, I do have a PlayStation 5 Pro console, so I boot up the game on that just to see how the game actually performs, and to my surprise, it's actually a lot better than I expected, and I'm getting a better frame rate compared to my PC. There are two modes that you can choose, performance and balance. I try out the game on the performance mode and I believe it's running internally around 1440p, I'm not sure, but even on the most demanding map, the most demanding section is still able to hold around 80 FPS. Most of the time is pushing even beyond around 100, close to that 120 range, which is the maximum that it can put out. There's no major hiccups, frame drops, it's a very smooth experience. I'm not here to compare my 3070 Ti with the PlayStation 5 Pro GPU. Of course, it has a bigger GPU with a lot of VRAM, but the thing is, PlayStation 5 Pro doesn't known to have a very powerful CPU. It's a very basic Zen 2 8-core 16-thread CPU. In terms of raw CPU performance, what I have in my PC was much powerful, but ultimately it all comes down to that optimization. And I've seen a lot of people who played the Battlefield lab version mentioning that the performance on the beta was much better compared to the labs. This is still a beta, so hopefully when the game fully launch, they will add more optimization, especially on the CPU side, to reduce the CPU stress a little bit, which will help you to gain a significant frame rate boost in my opinion. All in all, I'm happy the Battlefield is back, and a lot of people are super hyped, but I gotta say I'm still not sold on the game, and I'm someone who played every single Battlefield game, and I feel like Battlefield 6 in a much better state compared to the Battlefield 2042 open beta. It was terrible, and keeping that aside, I can see DICE took a lot of inspiration from the older Battlefield games, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and bringing that classic class-based system. Visually the game looks incredible, it got top-notch gunplay, animations, excellent sound design, and I gotta say I'm liking about 80% what I'm seeing on this open beta. But I'm personally not a big fan of the 3 maps they included here. I'm not talking about the visuals or the destruction, I'm only talking about the scale. These maps are way too small for a Battlefield game, which is very disappointing to me. Battlefield always had that large scale massive maps even on Battlefield 2042, but these maps feel way too compact, way too chaotic. It's more like a Call of Duty version of a Battlefield game. They mentioned they're going to release 9 maps at launch, and we already seen 3, and I'm kind of excited to see the new map they include in the next weekend, but I don't like what I'm seeing here, man. In terms of map design, the scale of this, it does feel more like I'm playing Delta Force, to be honest. And on top of that, they also added bots into the game again, just like in 2042. Not a big fan of that. And also seen some of the articles mentioning they're going to add skill-based matchmaking to the game. That means there's not going to be a proper server browser. Keeping that skill-based matchmaking aside for a minute, not having a proper server browser, it's extremely disappointing. If you're playing 2042 nowadays, you know how painful it is to find a proper playable server, and seems like the same thing is going to happen to Battlefield 6 as well. It might not be a big problem at launch, but in a few years down the line, especially in a limited regions like Asia, it's going to be a huge problem. And finally, I gotta say, I like the game, I enjoy the game. It's great that the Battlefield is back, but obviously I'm not going to pre-order or buy the game at launch. I'm just gonna wait till the launch, see how the people react, see how the game actually performs, then I'm gonna decide whether I'm buying the game or not. Well, that's pretty much it, guys, and hope this video helpful to you in any way if you are someone who is interested in Battlefield 6. And I would love to know your thoughts about the game. Have you guys played the beta yet? And what do you guys think about the game and how it performs on your system? I would love to know your thoughts down in the comment section as well. If you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned to the channel. I'll catch you guys soon in the next one. Stay safe.